Motorbikes are incredibly versatile and great at avoiding traffic. They're even the preferred mode of transportation in many major cities around the globe. A small handful of company creates the majority of motorcycles on the road. From the Vespa in Italy to Honda and Suzuki in Japan and Harley Davidson in the US, let's take a look at the best-selling bike brands in the world.
Here's where the fun begins, a two-wheel to somehow to get double the fun of the Vespa set.
In the 60s, Honda was already on top, and they're gonna remain there for quite a while. Still, their reign is not completely unbroken, so we'll get to them later. Instead, let's take a look at a lesser-known company called Piaggio. While you might not have heard of the company name itself, you most definitely know of their flagship product, the Vespa. The company actually started in the 1880s, and for decades they didn't make any scooters at all. They built train carriages, ship interiors, and eventually airplanes, proper heavy industry stuff. Then World War II happened. Their aircraft factories were destroyed, and Italy's roads were full of people who needed something cheap and reliable to get around. Enrico Piaggio, the CEO of the company, saw this and decided it was time to change things around. In order to create a cheap and reliable transportation device, he hired an aeronautical engineer named Corradino d'Ascanio, who actually hated motorcycles. Instead of thinking like a biker, he thought like an engineer, designing a small airplane for the streets. He gave it a step-through frame so you could ride it in normal clothes, a flat floor for your feet or bags, and a body that covered all the greasy parts. When Enrico saw the prototype, he supposedly said, "Sembra una Vespa," or "it looks like a wasp," and that's where the name Vespa comes from. They launched in 1946 and basically became the unofficial recovery vehicle of post-war Italy. It was cheap, sturdy, and anyone could ride it, even women wearing a skirt. And Piaggio didn't just keep it in Italy. They started licensing Vespa production all over the place. Germany, the UK, France, Spain, India, and a bunch of other countries built their own Vespas under license. The success of Piaggio is almost entirely due to Vespa, and so often the name Vespa is used to refer to the whole company. By 1963, they were overtaken by a Japanese competitor, Suzuki.
That's why Suzuki bikes are all-around performers.
Suzuki actually started in 1909 making looms for Japan's textile industry, not motorcycles. After the war, when the cotton market collapsed, they needed a new direction, and like Piaggio in Italy, turned to small motor vehicles. In 1952, they built a simple motorized bicycle called the Power Free, basically a normal bike with a small engine on it. It was cheap, easy to use, and arrived at exactly the right time for a country that was rebuilding after the war. As more people bought it, Suzuki kept moving further into two-wheelers. Their real turning point came in the early 1960s with Grand Prix racing. East German racer Ernst Degner joined Suzuki, bringing racing experience and new technology from Eastern Europe. In 1962, he won the 50cc World Championship for Suzuki, giving the company an instant boost to their reputation. Through the mid-60s, Suzuki started rolling out fast but still affordable road bikes, especially for younger riders who wanted performance on a budget. Bikes like the T20, also known as the X6 Hustler, helped build their image as the brand for quick, fun machines that weren't crazy expensive. A few years later, larger models and then the GT750 in the early 70s showed that Suzuki could also make big attention-grabbing bikes, not just small commuters. At the same time, they were investing heavily in off-road racing. In 1970, Suzuki became the first Japanese brand to win a motocross world championship, which boosted their reputation even further. With both street and off-road success, Suzuki's sales kept climbing. By 1975, they had even managed to overtake Honda and briefly become the best-selling motorcycle brand in the world. They stayed on top for a little while, but it wouldn't last forever. Honda had different plans.
Believe in freedom, believe in Honda, going where you like, your Honda bike and you.
By the 1960s, Honda was already the biggest motorcycle maker in the world. They were the brand everyone else had to beat, and even in the rare moments where they lost the top spot, they didn't stay down for long. Their big advantage was simple. They learned how to mass produce almost indestructible bikes that were easy to use. A huge part of that story is the Honda Super Cub. It launched in 1958. It was cheap, simple, very fuel efficient, and famously hard to break. By the early 1970s, it had already sold millions of units, and it went on to become one of the most produced motor vehicles in history. On the other end of the market, Honda was also selling some of the most popular fast and powerful bikes for people who wanted performance rather than comfort. In the mid-70s, or more specifically in 1975, they would then go on to launch the Goldwing, a big, comfortable touring bike that quickly became the standard choice for people wanting to go long distance. Behind all of this were their factories. They were massive, well organized, and focused on building bikes the same way every single time. That meant that Honda could mass produce reliable motorcycles at price points many people could afford, which was very hard for other brands to match. Even when Suzuki briefly took them over in sales, Honda didn't slow down. They kept expanding overseas, setting up production and assembly plants in Asia, Europe, and North America. By the 1980s, they were pushing more on new technology and sportier designs, all the while still maintaining their reputation for near indestructible bikes. Honda's dominance wasn't about one legendary model. It came from doing everything at once: small commuters, big tourers, sporty bikes, and everyday machines that all felt like they would last forever. Over time, their lineup only kept growing, and they would stay on top of the motorcycle world for a really long time. So let's talk about a newcomer up on this list who would overtake Suzuki: Yamaha. In the 80s and 90s, Yamaha built its reputation on making bikes that felt exciting to ride, not just practical for getting from A to B. They stuck with lively, lightweight two-strokes like the RZ series, which, due to how relatively cheap it was, became the first fast bike for many young riders. At the same time, Yamaha didn't limit that character to one style of bike. With models like the XV750 Virago, they brought the same brand identity into cruisers. They were more relaxed, better-looking bikes for people who cared about comfort and style, but still wanted something with personality. On top of that, Yamaha invested heavily in high-end sports bikes such as the FZR 1000. These weren't just about sales, they acted as halo models that showed what Yamaha could do at the top level and pulled the whole brand's image upwards. Racing tied it all together. Their presence in road racing and off-road championships sent a clear message: Yamaha was a rider-focused brand, serious about handling and performance. Their combination of top-notch sports bike performance and affordable fast bikes for consumers led to them overtaking Suzuki and becoming the second-place spot on this list. But by the late 90s, another company was about to shake things up. I'm talking about TVS.
आपका पाला ही ना पड़े।
TVS is an Indian brand that grew out of a family transport business in South India and slowly turned itself into a two-wheeler giant. Instead of chasing superbikes, they focused on giving millions of people their first affordable motorized transport. By the 1980s, they were building India's first two-seater moped, the TVS 50, and later entered a joint venture with Suzuki. That deal gave TVS proven Japanese technology and helped them learn how to mass-produce reliable small bikes at scale. Their real strength, especially in the late 90s, was volume at the lower end of the market. TVS sold mopeds, small motorcycles and scooters that were cheap to buy, cheap to run, and easy to fix. Exactly what Indian families, students, and workers needed. One clever move was going after new kinds of riders instead of just fighting over the same customers. The TVS Scooty, for example, was a small, light scooter that became especially popular with urban and women riders and helped TVS open up a whole new segment. At the same time, they were quietly getting very serious about quality. They rolled out Japanese-style quality programs across their factories, and in 2002, TVS became the first two-wheeler company in the world to win the Deming Application Prize, a major international quality award. Around the early 2000s, their first big in-house commuter motorcycle, the TVS Victor, showed how far they'd come. It sold in large numbers and helped push TVS's share of the Indian bike market upward, proving they could succeed with their own designs, not just joint venture models. Put all that together, ultra-practical products, a wide dealer network that reached deep into smaller towns, strong fuel economy and a growing reputation for quality, and the numbers started to snowball. This worked so well for them that they would even overtake their collaborator Suzuki by 1999 and move into third place of the best-selling bike brands in the world. As they reached their peak in 2001, they ended their collaboration with Suzuki. And just a couple years later, their sales would decline dramatically. The Indian market had moved on from 2 to 4-stroke bikes, and the majority of TVS sales came from 2-stroke bikes. Their competitors, on the other hand, were miles ahead for the Indian consumer market. Actually, let's take a quick look at Hero and Bajaj.
Hero glamour, simply magnetic.
To understand how TVS, Bajaj and Hero ended up on this list, we first have to take a quick look at India's economy. The country used to have a really tight economy where foreign ownership was pretty much impossible. They also had extremely high import tariffs and very strict industrial licenses. But in 1973, the Foreign Exchange Regulation Act put a rough ceiling of about 40% foreign equity in most sectors. That meant that Honda, Suzuki or Piaggio couldn't just own an Indian subsidiary outright, they needed an Indian majority company in front of them. So a kind of loophole emerged. Global brands came in either through joint ventures or licensing deals with Indian firms that were legally Indian controlled, but effectively just shell companies for foreign tech. In the 80s, you get TVS Suzuki as a JV and Hero Honda as a classic 50-50 style partnership. Suzuki and Honda supplied engines, designs and know-how. TVS and Hero provided the Indian ownership, factories and dealer networks. Bajaj, on the other hand, followed a slightly different route. It licensed Vespa designs from Piaggio from around 1960 into the early 1970s. Then later entered a technical collaboration with Kawasaki in the 80s for bikes like the KB100. Again, foreign technology running through an Indian company that met ownership rules. Over time, as TVS stopped their collaboration with Suzuki, Hero and Bajaj pulled ahead. This is mainly because their collaborations translated into huge scale and mass market dominance. The more successful they were, the less successful TVS became. These companies were doing so well that they all eventually outgrew their status as a channel for foreign companies to sell stuff in India. TVS split up from Suzuki in 2001, Hero and Honda agreed to end their deal in 2010, and the Bajaj-Kawasaki deal ended all the way in 2017. In 2009, both Hero and Bajaj would become the second and third best-selling bike brands in the world. While Yamaha was busy trying to surpass these two again, a different brand was slowly creeping up this list. A brand known for creating cheap electric commuters out of China, Yadea. Yadea's roots go back to the late 90s, where they were manufacturing small bikes for a very local clientele. But by the early 2000s, they shifted into a proper group. Then they pivoted from conventional motorcycles to electric two-wheelers around 2004. Instead of chasing big petrol bikes, they focused on simple, cheap city commuters, electric scooters and e-bikes designed for short urban trips. Their timing was perfect because in many large Chinese cities, policies started appearing banning or restricting petrol motorcycles in busy areas. In other words, if people still wanted to avoid traffic and get around conveniently, they had to switch to electric. On top of that, China already had dedicated bike lanes, huge demands for cheap transport, and low barriers to building e-bikes, so the market exploded and Yadea grew with it. By 2014, Yadea would overtake Suzuki, and then in 2020 they even landed as the number 3 best-selling bike brand in the world. With this, they effectively became the world's largest manufacturer of electric scooters. In 2024, the company announced it had passed 100 million electric two-wheelers sold globally. Their annual sales are still in the millions and they're exporting to dozens of countries. Yadea isn't the only brand to recently be coming out of China with a lot of success. Yamaha and Xiaodao are just 2 of many other big names coming out of the country. Both lean heavily into electric scooters and e-bikes, sell in huge volumes inside China, and have wide dealer and service networks that reach deep into smaller cities. They compete on price, practicality, and sheer availability, which makes them very hard to ignore if you're just looking for something cheap and reliable to get around town. On the more premium end, you also have companies like NIU that are building their brand around smart electric scooters. And when it comes to petrol, manufacturers like Zhongshan are also doing incredibly well. China in general is experiencing a huge vehicle boom. Both their car and motorbike industries are doing incredibly well on the global market. And as they are one of the most populated countries on earth, they're also one of the biggest markets for consumers. Now the question is, if they keep expanding and becoming more and more international, are we going to see a Chinese brand overtake Honda? Especially as e-bikes are getting more viable in various places around the world, it's really hard to tell. Still, Honda has been in a position of dominance for over 60 years now. I don't think it's going to be that easy to take them off their throne. Let me know what you think in the comments, have a good one, and see you next time.